Welcome to DD Cardinal Podcast. I am so excited that you're here. First, we're going to talk about Substack, and then we're going to talk about why I left Coimbra. So many people ask me questions. At the time, I didn't want to sound mean or rude, and I really do love Coimbra. It took a long time for me to kind of grow through what I really wanted to say. I'm still going to be a little probably mean or very straightforward. So I apologize to anybody who, lives in Coimbra, loves Coimbra, or, doesn't think that my thoughts are correct. These are just my thoughts. Because so many people have asked this question over TikTok and Substack and just in person, that I figured that I would make this one a free one, try to do as much as I could to kind of encapsulate why I left. There are a lot of people that want to move to smaller cities within or smaller towns within Portugal. And they ask me all the time, oh, didn't you love it? Oh, what didn't you like about it? So this is that podcast. If you haven't become a paid member or part of our membership, our community, let me tell you what it's about. It is much more intimate, much more supportive in a fashion that is sheltered, meaning that you can say things that maybe you wouldn't want to say out in a public forum. And for that reason, I take it very seriously. I want everybody to feel very comfortable. I want it to be as inclusive as possible. And I also want you to join if that's something that you want. I have been looking for community for a really long time. Coming to a new country, it's been really hard. And I turned to TikTok as my community, and it became my community. There are people that if I spend a couple of weeks off of the app and I don't post a video, they actually will message me and say, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while. Is everything okay? We want to check in. We know that you're alone. We know you don't have family. In the nicest way possible, they're checking up and they are being my community. They are also the comment warriors. They are the ones that even if they don't really have anything to say, they're gonna put that comment underneath my video because they want to see me succeed. And I want to do that for everybody that has done it for me. When I decided to walk away from my boyfriend and move across the world with no family, I lost a sense of community that was so profound that I didn't even realize that's what I was experiencing. There are more resources than us, so there's no scarcity mindset in this community. I want to just be able to have a sharing community where people feel very supported and heard. If that is something that you're interested in, please consider the paid membership. Couple minutes in and we still haven't talked about Coimbra. So let's talk about Coimbra. Let me talk to you first about my history with Portugal before I actually moved. I had come here several times and I remember absolutely hating Lisbon. I thought it was dirty. I thought there was too much graffiti. I didn't feel unsafe, but it just was like, what is here? Like, as a tourist, I just didn't understand, like, what am I supposed to look at? Another castle, another church. Wow, it's beautiful. But like even the oceans, you couldn't, like in Lisbon, you can't like just jump in and go swimming, right? So I was always drawn towards the north. And also I did the Camino Portuguese. So I started in Porto and then went and walked with my boyfriend at the time. Now, all of this time, I was getting the information that I needed in the long run to move here, but I didn't know it. I had come to Lisbon. We had walked the Camino. I had come back in a couple other times, and I had come to Coimbra multiple times and really, really liked it. I also had a couple friend group that were friends with me back in the US that had moved to Portugal, and they also lived in Coimbra at the time. This was kind of like the seeds that were planted in my head. And I had lived in a university town. I had taught at a university, having university students around, and that kind of like change of seasons where it's really slow and quiet in the summer, and then you have students in the fall. It was always really exciting for me back in the States. So I thought that would be great. It also has a river, and I am an avid kayaker. I have my own blow-up kayak. I would go kayaking in the States by myself. I had a whole group of people that I would love to go kayaking with. And so that was something else that was really drawing me to the city. And on top of it, it was very inexpensive because a lot of the studio apartments, which is what I wanted a studio apartment. There were tons of them because there were students everywhere, right? People who needed to rent apartments. I went and I spent 3 months, and it was supposedly the worst 3 months of the year. It was like November, December, January in Coimbra, the year before I moved. Or even started the process, because I wanted to see, could I live in a place, because people said it rains a lot. It gets really cold. There's no heating in your studio apartment. I wanted to see how much was the rain? How bad was it? Coming from Michigan, where we had a cloud index that was worse than Seattle, I was done with cloudy weather, but I also love fall. So I love that like darkness and the cold and your breath being like almost seen and the tip of your nose being cold. I love that. So I came, and that was 3 years ago already. I loved it. I stayed at a hostel. I kind of like traveled around, went to Porto, went to lots of other small cities in the area that I could get to by Flixbus or by the national bus. And I decided, okay, this is where I'm going to live. So I just went to a bunch of apartments. I found one, and she showed me a couple apartments. I was pretty confident that when I needed the lease, I would just take anything in that apartment complex, because I had seen like 4 of the 12 apartments and they all looked great. It had a beautiful backyard. It had a gym, and it was 400 euros, included everything, Wi-Fi, electric. There was no heat. There was no AC. Okay. That's pretty normal in Portugal. 400 euros. And the reason why I needed it to be really inexpensive was because at the time I knew that I would be juggling potentially my house mortgage, that Coimbra apartment, and potentially having to pay for accommodations in between pet sitting, or if pet sitting fell through. So if you don't know my story, that is going to be one of those podcasts, the about me of how I got here. It is the most unconventional alternative method to moving abroad that I have ever heard, in a combination of being alternative, how old I am, and what I chose to do. It is a crazy ride. I am really proud of how I stitched it all together and saved money during that time and didn't lose my mind, but that is for another podcast. So let's go back to Coimbra. My lease started in June, and I did not even move in until October. Part of my visa story is that it took a really, really, really long time. And I got so frustrated that I actually posted a video on TikTok. Some of my TikTok followers, almost 50% of my TikTok followers are Portuguese. And a Portuguese woman that was one of my comment warriors who commented to lift my videos, she messaged me and said, if you're okay with giving me your last name and your email address, I have a friend in CEF, which is the immigration portion, at least at that time it was, and I will have him check where your application is. And within 24 hours, my application was approved. It took me so long to get into that apartment. I moved in like October or November. It's very hazy. I don't remember. I did not have anything other than a backpack and a rolly carry-on car luggage, because for the last 6 months, I had been pet sitting all over the UK, the US, and sometimes Portugal, Italy. I had been trying to stay out of the EU as much as possible because I knew that I would only have 90 days out of 180 days in order to get to be in the EU without a residency visa. And I knew that once my residency visa was approved, I would have to fly back to the US and go through all of the dropping off the passport, having the visa put into the passport, picking up the passport, and then flying back. I did that within 3 days. And I pet sat in New York City during that time. Another crazy story. So I get into Coimbra. I'm super excited. If you don't know me and if you haven't seen my TikToks, I am someone who is actively trying to make friends. I am trying to make a community. I know that it works. I did it in the United States. I made a food club that was like 1,200 people. Twice a week, we would have parties at my house. We did the craziest things. I met the best people, and they supported me through everything. Okay, so I know that it can be done. Now, that was post-COVID, so now the lifestyle is a little bit different, but I knew that it would be done. Fast forward to Coimbra, I did everything I possibly could to make a community in Coimbra. For example, there were meetups that were kind of defunct. They hadn't had meetings in a long time. I contacted all of the organizers and said, I'm willing to take over the fees and transfer the organizer position, and I take over. Or can I be an assistant and start to have events? Because I knew my food club had started with Meetup, and I had 4 co-organizers. And so I knew that, that would be something easy, right? I tried to get together a group of people through all of them were married, all of them over 65. Then I tried to kind of organize myself with getting closer to people that I met. So being very proactive. I met them through internations meetings, and I really talked to them for a couple of hours. Said, why don't we exchange WhatsApp? And then I would say, oh, you said you like to go hiking. Let's go hiking. Nobody would ever answer me back. A couple people did eventually from these interactions reach out and try to reciprocate, but I often found that they were Americans. And I'm going to say this in the nicest way. I'm going to hold your hand when I say this. Often they were people who the only social activity that they were interested in was drinking. I drink. That's not an issue. But I will go to a beer festival. I don't have a problem with that. I do occasionally get drunk. I like myself a hard cider. That's not a problem. But when you are with a group of people that are downing 2 and 3 liters of sangria at a time, they're falling down, they're puking, they're in their 50s and 60s, I'm not interested in that. Well, I was having a really difficult time. Then let's fast forward to the language. Now, in Lisbon, you can go weeks without speaking any Portuguese at all, ever. Especially if you are living in either Lisbon in the tourist areas or Cascais, you could never learn the language. But in Coimbra, it was not only that they knew that I wasn't Portuguese, they made no effort to speak Portuguese. They made no effort to understand me when I spoke Portuguese. They made no effort when I would use Google Translate to write something down. The only time that I didn't have issues were in professional settings. So at the pharmacy, at the doctors, of course, they're speaking English. But when I needed something at the return desk, or I needed something like a different size, or I just wanted to see if they had a different color, or anything that you would think of in a casual setting, no one would talk to you at all. So it was very isolating, to say the least, especially for someone who is Midwest nice. I was isolated. There were days when I didn't speak to people. Days. And that turned into staying in my studio apartment, watching, Portuguese TV, going to McDonald's because they were the only ones that had a kiosk. and I didn't have to speak to anyone. I didn't have to like constantly have this barrier. So no friends, difficult, integrating into even the American expats, difficulty with the language barrier and the standoffness of the people. And then on top of that, there is this middle group of people that aren't there in Coimbra. And this makes sense to me now that it's a university town. And so you have these university students who are, between 18 and 23. And then you have old people, because everybody in between of working age is somewhere else. They're in Lisbon, they're in Porto. And the only way that I was made aware of this is that on Saturdays and Sundays, you would see all of these people bringing grandchildren to visit in the parks, walking by the water, in the cafes, right? So all of these people who live someplace else, but their family, older elderly family, live in Coimbra, they would bring their small kids and then they would leave. And so for my age group, I'm in my 50s, I'm still working. I tend to be a way more active than I think a lot of 50, 55-year-olds are. And I was like, God, where am I going to find friends? I can't find anything to do. And then that leads me to the next reason. I am somebody who will go out and do things by myself. I had an electric bike. There was a beautiful natural area very close to Coimbra. I was biking everywhere. I was walking everywhere. I, went on canoeing trips. I would do watercolors by the water, all kinds of stuff, but it was always by myself. I could not find anyone who was interested in what I wanted to do. And the people that I was surrounded by, when I would say like, oh, hey, you want to do watercoloring? It was always, yeah, let's come over and like, we'll have drinks and then we can color, or we can, paint. And so it was never just like, let's go outside. And I mean, like, why are we here in Portugal if you don't want to go outside? Like, let's go outside and have a picnic and just like enjoy ourselves, that kind of thing. What started happening was I was spending more time out of Coimbra than I was spending in Coimbra. I was doing everything that I possibly could to stay outside of the city. And I started to take pet sitting positions within Portugal. And as I started to take more and more closer to Lisbon, I started to get more active in the meetups, in the Facebook groups, in the WhatsApp groups, in the hiking groups, in the kayaking groups, and all of these groups. And it really became one of these things where I was like, you know what? I think this is where I need to be. But it didn't happen until my friend in Italy actually said to me, you know what? Don't leave the country, because I honestly was really ready to leave. I'm going to go back to pet sitting for another maybe year and be like a nomad. I have my job. It's completely remote, and I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do, because I knew that I wasn't going back to the US. I just didn't know where I wanted to be at this point. And I was willing at that point, because I was so starved for community, I was willing to kind of just like go someplace else and just pick up and just do anything. My friend who is an expat and an immigrant to Italy, but is from LA, said, before you leave, go to Lisbon and just see if that's where you think you could stay and live and enjoy and thrive. And so I started to take 2-3 week pet sits that were in the Algarve or were in the towns that are between Lisbon and Cascais. And I took 3 positions that really helped me cement my life already in Lisbon by going to meetups, by meeting other people, by being in WhatsApp groups and them saying, hey, this Wednesday we're going hiking. Does anybody want to go? This weekend we're going to be doing just a city walk. Does anybody want to go? Photography lessons. Okay, cool. I was up for anything. There was so much more here, which makes sense. I should have known as an extrovert that a bigger city was going to be where it was going to, happen. That's the reason why I left Coimbra. I feel like I'm too extroverted. I also feel like there's a gap of people of my age and in my situation that are there to even make friends with. And also, I feel like the community in Coimbra is much more, I guess, consistently used to migratory patterns. They're used to students coming in and out. They have very strong relationships with people that they've known for decades, but they're not really interested in starting any new relationships with people outside of their already known friend group, as well as the group or community of people that were immigrants and expats were not diverse. They were couples, they were older, and they weren't working, and they didn't have the same interests that I had. I had to move. I wanted to kind of sum that up because I hope that I said it in a nice and respectful way. Coimbra is a beautiful town. It's just, yeah, that's just not me. I'm so glad that I moved. I moved now it's 8 months ago. I cannot believe I've been here 8 months in the Lisbon area. I just recently talked to my landlord and he said that I could renew. So I'm hoping to renew and get a 2 or 3 year lease because I love the place so much. Coming in here and getting the community feel that I got was so reinforcing to the idea of like, yeah, this is it. So hopefully this is not too long-winded. I know I can talk for quite a while, but I feel like it's important to express like why, and it's so in depth, right? There's so many levels to it that I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, whatever, please comment and let me know. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon.